Hello and welcome. I'm Isuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. A Russian drone strike on a 21-story residential building in Odessa has reportedly killed 2 people and injured at least 14, including 3 children. Regional Governor Oleg Kaper confirmed that among them, 1 child is in critical condition following the overnight attack. The U.S. Supreme Court granted current President Donald Trump a legal victory as it concluded its term, according to media reports. The court ruled 6-3 that Trump's birthright citizenship order cannot be blocked nationwide, only for plaintiffs. The missile launched earlier towards Israel was claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels, according to reports, while the Israeli army said a missile fired from Yemen was most likely successfully intercepted, according to media reports. Qatar spokesman Majid al-Ansari has said that there's a window of opportunity for a Gaza truce as talks continue with Israel and Hamas, according to media reports. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump claimed a ceasefire could happen within a week, though disagreements remain. Polish President Andrzej Duda arrived in Kyiv to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to reports, he was received by Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, who called Duda Ukraine's true friend. A suicide attack in Pakistan has killed 13 soldiers and injured 29 others, including 19 civilians, collapsing 2 house roofs and injuring 6 children. The attacker remains unidentified. Hundreds have protested in Bangkok, demanding Thai Prime Minister Shinawatра's resignation over a border dispute with Cambodia and judicial scrutiny of a leaked call, marking the biggest rally since her party took power in 2023, according to reports. China's flood-stricken Guizhou province was hit by heavy rain for the second time in a week, according to reports. In response, China has expanded flood relief support, with the central government now covering 70% of compensation costs under new rules. The African Union has called the DRC-Rwanda peace deal a significant milestone, while UN Chief Antonio Guterres praised it as a significant step, and French President Emmanuel Macron hailed it as a historic step forward and credited US support. New details have emerged on why the US military held back its most powerful bunker-busting bomb during last week's strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. CNN reports that the US did not deploy the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP, on Iran's Isfahan site because the facility lies so deep underground that even that 30,000-pound bomb might not have penetrated effectively. The revelation came from Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Dan Kane, who made the remarks during a closed-door Senate briefing on Thursday. Instead, the US opted to use precision-guided Tomahawk missiles launched from a submarine to target the Isfahan site, believed to house over 60% of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. Meanwhile, the MOP bombs were used in the attacks on Iran's Fordo and Natanz facilities, both of which are considered more vulnerable than the heavily fortified Isfahan complex. As questions continue over how much Iran's nuclear capabilities were truly set back, another front of the conflict unfolded above ground, in grief and ceremony. In Tehran, Iran began a state funeral procession on Saturday, honoring the roughly 60 people killed during the war with Israel, many of them top military commanders and nuclear scientists. State media aired somber images from the capital, men and women dressed in black, waving Iranian flags and holding portraits of those killed. The coffins draped in the national flag were displayed near Engelab Square before the procession made its way towards Azadi Square, crossing nearly 11 kilometers through the heart of the city. Iranian media called the deceased martyrs of the war imposed by the Zionist regime, as large crowds gathered to pay their respects, a striking moment of public mourning amid a volatile and uncertain ceasefire. And we have guests joining us for this discussion. Yossi Cooper-Wasser is Israeli intelligence and security expert, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Yossi, for joining us today. Good to see you again. Do people in Middle East as well as in Israel now believe there's still room for diplomacy between Israel and Iran? Or has the recent attack pushed any chance of talks with the US or Israel off the table for Iran for now?
No, I believe that there is a room for negotiations with Iran now in order to reach an agreement that would make sure that Iran is not going to revive its nuclear project and its missile project. What we need now is some sort of verification on the ground that nothing like that is happening. And of course, this agreement should make sure that the Iranians are not trying again to enrich uranium and to accumulate and store enriched uranium at high levels or any kind of enriched uranium. This is critical for the future and to make sure that we can agree to lifting of the sanctions, or at least some sort of gradual lifting of the sanctions over Iran. That's what we need to see happening.
And Yossi, now seeing live footages of a funeral from Iran, how does this moment shape Iran's narrative for the wider Muslim world? Are they succeeding in casting themselves as victims of this aggression or Western aggression, according to Iranian narrative?
So. I don't think they managed to portray themselves as the victims. Of course, the aggressors, the real aggressors behind what happened, they stood behind the attack of the 7th of October by Hamas. They stood behind the effort to build a ring of fire around Israel that was destroyed by Israel, retaliation. They are those who are trying to move forward with a nuclear project, military nuclear project. They are not the victims, and everybody knows that. And I think many in the West and elsewhere thank us for doing the dirty job, as the German Chancellor called it. I think that what we see today in Iran is a funeral that is held to those people that belong to the regime and being attended by people who support the regime. But most of the Iranian people are against the regime. Most of the Iranian people ask very difficult questions that are directed towards the regime. How come that we spend all this money on building this ring of fire around Israel? Billions of dollars were spent on that and nothing came out of it. How come we spend so much money on the missiles and especially the nuclear project? Billions and billions, trillions of dollars were spent on that, and it all disappeared over 12 days, especially during one night. So it's and then while we spend so much money on all these fancy projects, the people of Iran are suffering, and they don't have electricity and they don't have water. And in spite of Iran being such a wealthy country, it cannot provide for its own citizens, and with all the oil and gas that they have. So these are the questions that the people of Iran are asking these days, and the government in Iran doesn't have an answer, because the point is that they spent all this money in vain. That's what the truth is, and everybody knows that. Now the people that want to see a change are a little bit fearful from doing something publicly, but between themselves, that's what they're saying. That's what and they are hoping that the regime will fall. That's what they hope for.
Thank you very much, Yossi Cooper-Wasser. You will stay with us, and now we move on to our next news. The Iran-aligned Houthi rebels in Yemen have claimed responsibility for a ballistic missile strike targeting the Israeli city of Beersheba. The announcement comes hours after Israel said it had most likely successfully intercepted a missile fired from Yemen. In a statement released by the group, the Houthis said their missile unit launched a DHU Al-Fikar ballistic missile aimed at what they called a sensitive target in southern Israel. They claimed the strike had successfully achieved its goal. The statement also referenced earlier attacks last week, alleging that Houthi forces carried out multiple strikes targeting locations in Beersheba, Jaffa, and Haifa, using a combination of ballistic missiles and drones. Since November 2023, the Houthis have been launching attacks on Israeli cities and shipping vessels linked to Israel in response to the ongoing war in Gaza. The conflict has drawn in regional actors and continues to escalate beyond Gaza's borders. Now we go back to our discussion with Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He's Israeli intelligence and security expert. Thank you, Yossi, for staying with us. Now, as tensions rise in these regions, do you think that how is it that it's possible for Houthis to have such advanced weapons that reached Israel's cities like Haifa and Beersheba?
Well, the Houthis are a client of the Iranians, and the Iranians are those who supply them with the technology and with the capabilities. And some of it is being assembled in Yemen, but a lot of the components come from Iran. And this is how they have the capability to launch long-range missiles towards us. We have to remember that Yemen is about almost 2,000 kilometers away from Israel. And they keep launching these missiles. They don't launch salvos, they launch one by one. Every couple of days they launch a missile. And we are able to cope with that most of the time. 95% of these missiles are intercepted, including this one this morning was intercepted. But from time to time, they manage to penetrate through our missile defense system. 5% or less of the attempts manage to penetrate. And this happens. The Houthis are a very fanatic regime. They are totally committed to destroying Israel for some unknown reason. We have nothing against the Houthis, and we nevertheless, from time to time, have to retaliate. We carried out several attacks inside the areas controlled by the Houthis in Yemen. So far, this doesn't deter them from keeping launching these missiles towards us, and so it means that we shall have to do more in order to convince them to stop this nuisance.
Yossi, you will stay with us as we continue with this news. Tensions flared in the West Bank overnight as dozens of Israeli settlers allegedly attacked IDF soldiers near the Palestinian village of Kafr Malik. According to the Israeli military, the incident began when troops intercepted vehicles heading towards the area, which had been declared a closed military zone following a previous settler attack earlier this week. The IDF says that upon arrival, dozens of Israeli civilians threw stones, physically and verbally assaulted soldiers, including a battalion commander, and damaged security vehicles. In a serious escalation, some allegedly attempted to ram soldiers with their cars. Troops responded with crowd control measures, and 6 suspects were detained and later handed over to police. The IDF and Israeli police had issued a joint statement condemning any violence against security forces, vowing to take firm action against those responsible. Now we go back to guest discussion. We are joined by Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He is Israeli intelligence and security expert, joining us live from Tel Aviv. Yossi, what can you tell us more about the situation that we are seeing? Is this the first time that we are seeing Israeli citizens attacking IDF soldiers or people who are supposed to be protecting them?
Fortunately, this is not the first time. It happens from time to time. There are tensions between some of the settlers, some radical settlers, and and the security forces in the areas controlled by Israel in the Judea and Samaria. And the settlers, those settlers who do that, are very upset with what they consider to be soft hand used by the government in order to deal with the terror and the violence directed towards them by some of the Arabs living there. And they think not enough is being done in order to protect them, and that's why they are very furious with the police and the security forces and the other security forces. And in some cases, occasionally, they even use force, and that's totally unacceptable. And we saw it this morning when 6 of them were arrested. We very much unhappy with this development and try to make sure that it will not repeat itself. That's why the arrests were taking place.
Thank you, Yossi. You will stay with us as we move on to our next news. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has met for the first time with relatives of hostages held in Gaza, marking a significant moment in the bid to secure their release. The meeting took place in Washington, D.C. and was confirmed by the Hostages and Missing Families Forum in a statement issued in Hebrew. During the discussion, Rubio reportedly told family members that the real victory in Gaza will be achieved only when all the hostages return home. The relatives stressed that they believe a deal to secure the hostages' release is still possible and said that they trust the Trump administration to prioritize efforts towards that goal. The meeting comes amid ongoing negotiations and mounting international pressure for a ceasefire and a prisoner exchange agreement in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Now we are joined by Yossi Cooper-Wasser for this discussion. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert. Yossi, thank you for staying with us. How significant is Secretary Rubio's public statement that real victory is bringing all the hostages home, and are we seeing some kind of shift, or is there political or military calculus that will take place in upcoming maybe week or so?
Well, first of all, definitely the release of all the hostages is part of the victory in Gaza. We are not going to be victorious unless we bring back all the hostages home. That's clear. But is it the only component of the victory? This is not the case. In order to be victorious in Gaza, we also have to make sure that we defeat Hamas, that Hamas doesn't have the capability to rule over Gaza, and it is disarmed so that Gaza will not serve in the future as a basis from which such attacks like the 7th of October can be launched against Israel. And for that, we need more pressure on Hamas. And we believe that following what happened with Iran, and the very close cooperation between us and the Americans in the Iranian arena, we shall be able to see some progress in the negotiations with Hamas that would allow some of the hostages or all of the hostages come home in the context of an agreement that would lead to the disarmament of the Hamas in Gaza. There's a new effort to bring this to make it materialized, and I hope that's going to bear fruit. The Egyptians are working on a new idea. The Americans are working on something. The American envoy for that purpose, Mr. Witkoff, said that he expects something new in the next week. There are all kinds of rumors about something happening. I think behind it stands the fact that after Iran was defeated, Hamas feels even weaker than it used to feel before. It doesn't have the Iranian backing anymore, or it cannot rely on the Iranian backing, and it is totally isolated. And so we have to believe that this isolation will make it more flexible and more ready to accept the new ideas that are being presented now.
Yossi will stay with us. Now we move on to our next news. Qatar says efforts are underway to capitalize on the recent ceasefire between Israel and Iran, with hopes of translating that momentum into a truce and hostage release deal in Gaza. In an interview, Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid Al-Ansari confirmed that mediators are actively engaging with both Israel and Hamas. He warned that failing to seize this moment would be an opportunity lost amongst many in the near past, adding, "We don't want to see that again." Qatar has been a key player in past negotiations involving hostage exchanges and ceasefires, and this latest push signals renewed diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the months-long conflict in Gaza. Now we move on to our next news. The U.S. Supreme Court has handed President Donald Trump a significant victory, limiting lower courts' power to block presidential orders in a 6-3 decision. The court sided with Trump on his executive order to end birthright citizenship for non-citizens and undocumented migrants. The ruling does not specifically address the birthright citizenship issue, but sets a precedent for how executive actions can be challenged in the future. Immigrant rights groups and 22 states had sued Trump over the order, which aimed to end automatic citizenship for people born in the U.S. The court's decision limits the use of universal injunctions by federal courts, allowing Trump to order to take effect 30 days after the ruling. Trump called the decision a monumental victory for the Constitution, while liberal justices dissented, claiming the ruling erodes the Constitution. Legal challenges are expected, and the court is expected to address the issue of birthright citizenship in the fall. Now, we wait for and see how long and how far will this win for Trump's administration go on, and what comes next for from Trump or Trump administration's demands. And the U.S. Supreme Court has handed Now we are joined by guest Ross Feingold for this discussion. He's a political analyst joining us live from Taipei. Thank you for joining us today. Good to see you. Ross, from a political risk perspective, how does this ruling reshape the balance of power between the presidency and the courts, especially on immigration? On to you.
Yeah, this ruling deprives what we call district court judges in the federal court system of issuing nationwide injunctions. So the frustration for President Trump and before him President Biden, because this really is a more recent phenomenon, is opponents of a presidential executive order would go to a district court and request a nationwide injunction, and the district court judge, whose authority technically only applies in that federal court district, would issue an injunction that the judge said applied across the entire country. And now the Supreme Court has said that federal district court judges can no longer do this. They can only issue an injunction that applies within the district where that judge sits. So this is a huge change. It deprives the district court judges of an ability to make a ruling that would apply all across the country. And for opponents of a presidential executive order, regardless of who the president is or what the order is, they've lost a weapon that they could use to oppose something that the president has done. So specifically with regard to Trump's immigration policies, whatever orders that district court judges make about not deporting a certain classification of asylum seekers or people who are undocumented, that order can now only apply in the district where that judge sits. The judges can no longer issue nationwide injunctions. So it really gives the president a much broader authority to do what the president wants to do.
And looking at this, how significant is the only 30-day window before this order takes effect? Are rights groups maybe preparing more or any last-minute legal or political actions? We already know that 22 states are suing this administration regarding this issue.
The Supreme Court decision left a little bit of wiggle room. The judges said that, the justices said that maybe a class action lawsuit that seeks a national class would be effective. What that means is if somebody brings litigation in a particular district court, but they say that they want class action means that there's a large number of potential plaintiffs and they are all across the country and they are joining together to seek legal action. So in that circumstance, it would be called a class action lawsuit. In theory, you could have a class of plaintiffs who are all across the country. They could be in many states. They could even be in 50 states. So again, the justices in their decision, they left a little room for this. So it's possible that opponents of certain executive orders issued by President Trump would form a class and pursue a class action lawsuit. And then they could say, because the class includes people, the class of plaintiffs includes people in all 50 states, then there could be, in theory, an injunction issued by the judge, the district court judge, that would apply in every state. But they have to emphasize, it's extraordinarily hard work and difficult to form a class that's going to have people in 50 states. That really is a huge burden on the lawyers who are going to be representing the plaintiffs. So again, one has to assume that this is just a huge victory for President Trump. And that's why he was so happy on Friday. He even came out to take questions from the media and celebrate the decision.
And looking at just maybe 2 weeks ago or a week ago, we saw a lot of protests, and which even turned violent, taking places in LA and many other liberal or left-winged states. Do you think there's some chances, or maybe we might see something like this again because of this ruling that has taken place?
Well, I hate to forecast that there'd be violent protests, but certainly we're going to see rallies for immigration rights and rallies against the immigration policies, and specifically the deportation policies of the Trump administration. I think we're going to continue to see that. But it's one thing to get people together for a rally. It's another to actually change the course of policy making. And again, with this decision by the Supreme Court, once it takes effect in 30 days, the executive authority of the president has now expanded significantly. And President Trump is going to use that authority, most specifically or most immediately in the immigration space, but conceivably he could use this authority with regard to other policy issues as well.
Thank you very much, Ross Feingold, for joining us today and sharing your expertise as a political analyst with us and our viewers. Now we move on to our next news. US President Donald Trump has abruptly cut off trade talks with Canada over its digital services tax on US tech firms. Calling it a blatant attack, Trump said he would introduce new tariffs on Canadian goods within the next week. The move throws US-Canada relations back into chaos after a calm period, including a recent G7 meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. The tax, which targets companies like Amazon, Meta, and Google, is a 3% levy on digital revenue above $20 million from Canadian users. Trump announced the termination of all trade discussions with Canada until the text is reversed. Calling Canada a difficult country to trade with, Canada responded saying it would continue engaging in negotiations. US stocks were temporarily impacted by the news but recovered. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the government could retaliate against Canada and other countries with similar taxes. Meanwhile, trade talks with Europe and Asian countries, including China, continue as part of Trump's wider economic strategy. The US President Donald Trump said that his country is aiming to remove all trade barriers with India, a move he called unthinkable. Speaking at the White House, Trump expressed hope that a trade deal with India would allow the US to trade freely, insisting that current restrictions are impacting trade opportunities. Trump's remarks came ahead of his July 9 deadline to impose reciprocal tariffs. However, he said the deadline could be extended. Trade talks between India and the US have hit a stalemate over issues such as import duties on auto components, steel, and farm products. India is pushing for a rollback of the proposed 26% tariff. While the US has yet to agree, despite the impasse, both countries remain committed to expanding trade. In February, Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed to a phased trade deal, aiming to boost trade to $500 billion by 2030. Now we move on to our next news. Russian President Vladimir Putin is extending rare praise for US President Donald Trump, calling him a courageous leader and crediting him for improving US-Russia ties. This comes as the US President stated that he thinks something will happen in Russia's war in Ukraine that would get it settled. In a press conference held in Minsk, Putin said relations between Moscow and Washington are beginning to stabilize, and it's thanks to Trump. He lauded the American president for efforts to ease the war in Ukraine and described Trump as a very courageous person, who he claimed has survived 2 assassination attempts. Here's what Putin had to say.
Два абсолютно противоположных меморандума, но переговоры для того и организуются, и проводятся для того, чтобы искать пути сближения. Ну, а то, что они были прямо противоположными, мне кажется, здесь удивительного тоже ничего нет. Детализировать я бы не хотел, потому что считаю нецелесообразным, даже вредным предварять сами переговоры.
Putin also expressed openness to face-to-face meeting with Trump, calling it quite possible, though he stressed that such a meeting would require thorough preparation. The Russian leader added that while not all diplomatic knots have been untied, he believes both sides are finally moving forward. The comments come ahead of a proposed fresh round of peace talks in Istanbul aimed at resolving the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Putin confirmed that ceasefire terms will likely be on the table during the upcoming negotiations. In response, President Trump welcomed Putin's praise, saying Putin respects our country. Trump also claimed that global leaders, including China's Xi Jinping and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, now treat the United States with renewed respect. Moreover, Putin took aim at NATO's plans to increase military spending and accused the West of manipulating fears of Russian aggression to justify its expansion. Putin also echoed Trump's recent statement that the war in Ukraine is becoming a mess for the Kremlin, and even revealed that Moscow had approached Washington with a proposal to help mediate the Iran-Israel crisis. With both leaders exchanging signals of potential collaboration, the geopolitical stage could soon see a reset in dynamics, though many Western allies remain wary of Moscow's long-term intentions. Now we move on to our next news. Polish President Andrzej Duda has arrived in Kyiv for a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, according to Duda's office. This comes as Kyiv aims to build support among allies at a critical juncture in its war with Russia. Reportedly, Duda arrived as part of a farewell gesture ahead of his departure from office in August. He was greeted at the train station by Foreign Minister Andrii Sybiha, who called the Polish leader Ukraine's true friend. Since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, Poland has emerged as one of the Ukraine's most committed allies, providing weapons, sheltering millions of refugees, and rallying international support. Over time, the relations between the two countries has faced strains due to political disagreements, economic fatigue, and disputes over grain imports and historical grievances. In early June, conservative historian Karol Nawrocki won the second round of the Polish presidential election with 50.89% of the vote. Duda's successor has said that he remains committed to helping Ukraine's defense effort, but opposes Kyiv joining Western alliances such as NATO. Now we move on to our next news. A Russian drone strike has killed 2 people and injured 14 others, including children in Ukraine's southern port city of Odessa. According to local authorities, the attack hit a residential building and rescuers pulled 2 bodies from the rubble, as per Odessa Governor Oleg Kuiper. The strike took place overnight and left 3 children among the injured. Meanwhile, in the southern Kherson region, 1 person was reported killed and 3 others wounded in separate Russian attacks. Moscow has intensified its missile and drone strikes on Ukrainian cities as US-backed peace talks appear to have stalled amid the ongoing conflict. Meanwhile, Russian local media has reported that Russia has inflicted heavy losses on Ukrainian forces across multiple battlefronts. In the east, Russia's military says it killed up to 200 Ukrainian troops and destroyed 3 Starlink stations, along with an American-made M113 armored vehicle, ammunition depots, and artillery guns. These claims were made by Alexei Yakovlev, an officer from the Eastern Group's press center. In the south, officials say up to 175 Ukrainian soldiers were killed in combat, along with a US-made M777 howitzer and another military equipment, according to officer Yevgeny Tretyakov. Furthermore, the Dnipro Group claims to have eliminated up to 80 Ukrainian troops and destroyed 2 electronic warfare stations and 3 ammunition depots, while in the north, Russia reports up to 195 Ukrainian casualties, along with the destruction of an ammunition depot, armed vehicles, and artillery units, according to Russian officer Andrei Shershnev. These strikes targeted troops and equipment across several regions, including Sumy and Kharkiv. These claims have not been independently verified and come amid ongoing intensified military operations on both sides. In a related development, Ukraine launched another strike deep inside Russia, hitting a military airbase in the Volgograd region. Kyiv's military said that 4 Russian Su-34 fighter bombers were damaged or destroyed in an overnight operation at the Marinovka base, located nearly 900 kilometers from the border. The operation was carried out by Ukraine's special forces in coordination with the SBU security service. Besides the aircraft, Ukraine claims that key technical facilities used to maintain Russian warplanes were also struck. Russia has yet to respond to these claims. The Su-34s targeted are among Russia's primary aircraft for bombing Ukrainian cities, often deployed to launch guided bombs. This strike is part of a series of long-range attacks by Ukraine on military and industrial sites inside Russia. Earlier this month, Operation Spider's Web saw Ukraine hit multiple Russian bomber bases far from the front lines. Ukraine says these strikes are essential to weaken Russia's offensive capabilities, particularly as Moscow escalates attacks on civilian areas. Now we move on to our next news. A suicide bomber drove an explosive-laden vehicle into a military convoy in Pakistan's North Waziristan district of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, killing 16 soldiers and injuring over 24 others, including civilians, police officers, and local officials. The attack, which occurred in a volatile tribal region near the Afghan border, was claimed by the Hafiz Gul Bahadur Group, a faction of the Pakistani Taliban. The explosion was so intense it caused the collapse of nearby houses, including injuring 6 children. Officials initially reported 13 fatalities, later updated to 16. The wounded include military personnel and 19 civilians. Authorities have not released official figures in the total injured. This bombing comes amid a spike in terrorist attacks in Pakistan's border areas. Islamabad blames Kabul for sheltering insurgents, a claim Afghanistan's Taliban government denies. According to a report, nearly 290 people, mostly security forces, have been killed in similar attacks across Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan so far in 2025. South Korea's former president Yoon Suk-yeol is currently under investigation for his failed attempt to declare martial law in December 2025. Today, Yoon arrived at the Seoul High Prosecutor's office for questioning following a summons from a special prosecutor. The probe has intensified, with authorities investigating the ousted leader's role, which went against the nation's democratic values. Yoon's lawyers have criticized the investigation as politically motivated, claiming that the public questioning is an attempt to humiliate him. Despite this, Yoon has expressed his intention to cooperate with authorities and provide the truth. The martial law attempt was a turning point in South Korea's history, as it came at a time when the country prided itself on its democratic progress after overcoming military dictatorship in the 1980s. Yoon was impeached in April by the Constitutional Court. Following Parliament's decision, a special prosecutor was appointed earlier this month to oversee the investigation, which includes a team of over 200 investigators. Yoon, who was previously a top prosecutor before his election as president in 2022, while a court recently rejected a warrant for his arrest. Citing his willingness to cooperate, the investigation is still ongoing. Now we move on to our next news. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen has expressed his country's commitment to resolving the ongoing border dispute with Thailand peacefully. Speaking at an event marking the 74th anniversary of his ruling Cambodian People's Party, Hun Sen addressed tensions sparked by armed clashes at the border last month. The violence left one Cambodian soldier dead, leading to a series of retaliatory measures, including troop mobilizations and trade disruptions. Hun Sen condemned what he called an illegal attack by Thai forces on Cambodian troops and vowed to seek a diplomatic solution, stressing the importance of maintaining sovereignty and integrity in the region. Meanwhile, in Thailand, thousands of protesters have rallied in the capital Bangkok, calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra. The demonstration, sparked by a leaked phone call between the Prime Minister and Cambodia's former leader, Hun Sen, saw around 4,000 people gathered near the Victory Monument. The protesters, many of them senior-aged activists, expressed outrage over the Prime Minister's handling of the border crisis, with some accusing her of compromising Thailand's sovereignty. The Prime Minister, currently facing legal challenges and political unrest, acknowledged the protesters' right to demonstrate, but called for peaceful protests as she faces a critical week ahead, with potential legal and political consequences looming. Now we move on to our next news. The World Health Organization has said its investigation into the origins of COVID-19 is still incomplete, with key data needed to fully assess how the pandemic began still missing. The agency's Scientific Advisory Group for the Origins of Novel Pathogens, or SAGO, released its latest report this week, and while it noted some progress in understanding the virus's origins, it also stressed that crucial information remains unavailable. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus told reporters that China has not provided hundreds of early genetic sequences nor detailed information about animals sold at markets in Wuhan or about research and biosafety conditions at Wuhan laboratories. He said the organization has also asked for intelligence reports from other governments, but so far access remains limited. Let's listen in.
WHO recognized that China has shared some of this information, but not everything that we have requested. Despite our repeated requests, China hasn't provided hundreds of viral sequences from individuals with COVID-19 early in the pandemic. More detailed information on animals sold at markets in Wuhan, and information on work done and biosafety conditions at laboratories in Wuhan. WHO is also aware of intelligence reports performed by other governments around the world on the origins of COVID-19. We have also requested access to those reports. Neither WHO nor SEGO has yet had access to these reports or their underlying data.
The pandemic, which began in late 2019 and was declared a global crisis in March 2020, has killed an estimated 20 million people, according to WHO estimates. Officials say understanding its origin is essential to prevent future outbreaks. The WHO continues to urge countries, especially China, to cooperate fully and openly in sharing all relevant data. Now we move on to our next news. In Venice, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez have tied the knot in a star-studded black tie ceremony on the island of San Giorgio Maggiore. Lauren Sanchez shares a stunning photo from her fairy tale wedding to Amazon founder Jeff Bezos in Venice. The private celebration included celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, the Kardashians, Tom Brady, Queen Rania, and Ivanka Trump. The couple were serenaded by Matteo Bocelli and served a wedding feast by Michelin-starred chef Fabrizio Mellino. French pastry chef Cédric Grolet made the cake. Guests stayed at luxury hotels including the Amman Gritti Palace and St. Regis. The couple is donating 3 million euros to Venice and employing local artisans for everything from Murano glass to historic biscuits. But outside the celebrations, protesters accused Bezos of excess, projecting messages like "No Kings, no Bezos" onto city landmarks. Despite environmental concerns over private jets and yachts, Italian officials say the wedding could generate nearly 1 billion euros in media value. The celebration comes amid a red heat alert in Venice as the city faces growing pressure over tourism and climate impact. Now we move on to our next news. In a stunning move by the U.S. Department of Justice, 3 prosecutors have been abruptly fired. The dismissals, which include 2 senior supervisors and a line attorney, were confirmed Friday and are part of a broader series of actions taken by the Trump administration. These prosecutors had been integral to the investigation and prosecution of those involved in the violent insurrection that took place nearly 4 years ago. The terminations were confirmed by sources familiar with the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity. A letter signed by Attorney General Pam Bondi was issued to one of the prosecutors. The letter, however, did not offer a clear explanation of the removals, simply citing Article 2 of the United States Constitution and the laws of the United States. This action adds to a growing list of moves by the Trump administration on that critics argue undermine the Justice Department's independence and erode civil service protections for career lawyers. The dismissal of these prosecutors comes on the heels of similar actions in recent months, including the demotions of several key figures who oversaw the prosecution of January 6th rioters. The firings has sparked concern that such moves may be politically motivated, with a broader effort to reshape the Justice Department to align with political interests. Now we move on to our next news. Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial reached a critical juncture Friday in Manhattan. As closing arguments wrapped up, Combs' defense lawyer urged the jury to find the hip-hop mogul not guilty, arguing prosecutors have unfairly criminalized his sexual preferences rather than presenting credible evidence. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo described the trial as a fake trial, claiming prosecutors used Combs' private life as the basis for charges including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Combs, 55, who rose to fame as a music executive and cultural icon, faces serious allegations including operating an illegal sex ring tied to violent crimes such as arson, kidnapping, and bribery. Prosecutors painted a starkly different picture during the 6-week trial, with testimony from former girlfriends detailing drug-fueled sex parties and alleged abuse. Surveillance footage shown in court reportedly captured Combs physically assaulting one of the women, while employees testified about facilitating these encounters. During her rebuttal, prosecutor Maureen Comey accused the defense of deflecting blame onto victims and investigators rather than addressing Combs' alleged criminal conduct. The jury is now poised to begin deliberations early next week, with a unanimous verdict required. If convicted on all counts, Sean Diddy Combs could face life imprisonment. Judge Arun Subramanian will provide final instructions to the jury on Monday before deliberations commence. Now we move on to our next news. Europe is bracing for a dangerous heat wave this weekend, with temperatures expected to soar well above 40 degrees Celsius in several countries. Forecasters say this could be one of the most intense heat events in recent years. In France, 4 southern departments are already under heat alerts, including Bouches du Rhône and Pyrenees Orientalis. By Saturday, 14 regions could be under warning. Meteorologists are warning of a heat dome effect, trapping hot air and pushing temperatures as much as 15 degrees above normal. The heat wave isn't just limited to France. In Portugal, temperatures in Lisbon are expected to reach 42 degrees, with wildfire alerts in place. Weather officials there warn that dry conditions, high temperatures, and strong winds could make fire risk extreme. Spain is also facing scorching temperatures, with 43 degrees forecast in Andalusia and other parts of the country. Authorities say their hospitals are preparing for a rise in heat stroke cases, especially among children, seniors, and those with pre-existing health conditions. The Mediterranean region as a whole is expected to be hit hard, including parts of Italy, Greece, and the Balkans. Officials across the continent are urging people to stay hydrated, avoid strenuous outdoor activity, and watch out for signs of heat exhaustion. Let's listen in to what some of the people from Europe are now saying.
Sa précocité. La vague de chaleur la plus précoce enregistrée depuis 1947 en France métropolitaine, elle date de 2022, elle avait débuté le 15 juin. Ensuite, il y a eu 2005 et 2017 qui avaient débuté le 18 juin. Ce qui fait que cette vague de chaleur, elle est la 4e la plus précoce. D'ailleurs, vous aurez peut-être remarqué, mais ces 4 vagues de chaleur que je viens de citer, elles datent du 21e siècle. On n'a jamais eu de vague de chaleur aussi précoce comme ça durant le XXe siècle, ce qui, par ailleurs, montre un peu l'accélération du réchauffement climatique et les conséquences qui y sont associées.
To come, it's the first time we've been here to Venice, and it's very nice to come to the heat. When we got here last night, there were like storms, there's fork lightning, and then it rained, and that was beautiful to see. So yeah, but it is very hot. Yeah, I'm sweating.
Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.